Stay there. Just stay and talk. Sit down on the stairs and just talk to my colleague for a second.
I'm fine.
Okay.
It's the morning of the 23rd of August 2017 and Hertfordshire police have just arrived at a suspected suicide. Steven Gane has found his girlfriend Kellie Sutton unconscious at her home.
What's caused this?
I don't know.
You don't know?
As police try to find out what's happened, he becomes increasingly agitated, desperate, it appears, to be by his girlfriend's side.
I want to go to hospital.
But the portrayal of a distraught, worried partner belied the reality. The inquest jury were read a transcript of this conversation Gane had in a pub barely a month after Kellie had died, the friend recording it to help the police investigation.
She's dead.
Who's dead? Who?
She's brown bread.
Who?
Kel.
He's later heard saying,
She's made me lose my job, house. She made me lose my stuff, all because of her selfish actions. She could have done it after I got my motor.
Gane had subjected Kellie to months of violent abuse. He headbutted her, threw her across the room. She started having to wear makeup to cover the bruises. He was eventually convicted and jailed after she died for controlling and coercive behaviour in a landmark court case. But for Kellie's family, justice was still not done. That, the family hope, changes today. In an unprecedented inquest conclusion, Kellie was found to have been unlawfully killed, even though she took her own life, linking the domestic abuse directly to her suicide. It's what Kellie's mum, Pam, says she has always known.
Obviously, he wasn't charged with manslaughter or anything. So that kind of made me angry, because if she hadn't met him, she wouldn't have been in that mindset. She wouldn't have done what she did. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, he's responsible. And I've always got to think that way. Because until he came along, my daughter was happy.
Pam hopes police and the Crown Prosecution Service will now look at reopening the case against Gane so he can properly pay for what he's done.
She was very happy. She would have her radio on all the time, and she'd be dancing and singing all the time in the kitchen. So I went from having a daughter to losing my daughter, losing my grandchildren. I went from being happy and having a life to basically existing and sitting on the sofa and staring at a TV, because I feel I've got no reason to leave the house anymore. There's no reason for me to get dressed, because what am I going to leave the house for?
Outside the court today, the family lawyer read this statement.
We have fought now for many years for this inquest and for this unlawful killing conclusion. The family now call on the CPS to reconsider this case and to charge Steven Gane with unlawful act manslaughter, so he can also be held accountable in the criminal courts. The family also believe that the police failed to protect Kellie before she died, and that there was so much more that could have been done by professionals to help her.
The inquest jury agreed, reaching a damning conclusion about the inadequacies of Hertfordshire police in Kellie's case, that there were numerous opportunities missed which might have altered the final outcome. The critical one, captured in this body cam footage.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay.
Sure?
Yeah.
On the 9th of July, just weeks before Kellie took her own life, police were called to her house by worried neighbours. An incident described in court as instrumental to the tragedy which would follow. Kellie is visibly distressed. She's spoken to in the lounge, while Steven Gane is led into the kitchen.
I don't want to go down that route, you know.
I've been down that path already. I can't want to be going.
Yes, it's a crap path. It's a lot of paperwork for us. So he says he wants to stay here to talk to her, and then he'll go. We're not going to be called back here. Seems quite reasonable. Seems quite reasonable to me.
The officers leave without checking on the welfare of Kellie's children or speaking to the neighbours around 30 minutes after arriving. Kellie told a police officer that day she was very frightened of Gane, who she said was a very angry person. She told the officer he was controlling and excessively jealous, aggressive, and had been arrested before. But in the critical domestic abuse risk assessment, Kellie's risk is judged to be standard.
They had a very blasé attitude. They basically didn't show much interest in what was going on, even though she was really upset and she was crying. And they just basically couldn't wait to get out of there and go and do a real job. As far as they was concerned, it wasn't a real job.
Today, the force, which failed her and her daughter so badly, apologised. Pam says an apology she's waited 6 years for.
I assume she's been given an apology. If that is not the case, on behalf of the constabulary, I want to offer her that apology.
Kellie's abuser, Steven Gane, was called to give evidence to the jury, but declined to answer the overwhelming majority of the questions. As for the family Kellie left behind, they desperately hope something positive will come from this, that women trapped by abusers will get the help they need before it's too late. Kellie Sutton would have been 36 tomorrow.
Jackie Long reporting there. Joining me now is Dame Vera Baird, who formerly served as Solicitor General for England and Wales, Victims Commissioner and Northumbria Police and Crime Commissioner. Dame Vera Baird, it's a terribly tragic story, but how landmark is this conclusion today?
It is a very significant move indeed. It draws for the first time the link between domestic abuse, which drives women in particular into feeling utterly hopeless and killing themselves, and saying that amounts to an unlawful killing, that there's a causative link between the two. It's the UK first, and it's very important because I think domestic abuse is not fully understood. It's clearly not very well understood by the police. It is not, a fight on a drunken night out. It is about somebody like this man taking her money off her, making her stay at home, loosening her from all her friends and her family. So they talked about her being bubbly and then completely withdrawn, calling her a whore and a slut all the time, knocking her about. She was injured twice, very badly, in a very short time. She is utterly in his control, has no way of getting out of it. And ultimately, his conduct makes her kill herself.
Well, I mean, do you think, therefore, that the case against him should be reopened?
I think that's the challenge now to the CPS, that they should look at it. I don't know if they ever did look at it as a potential manslaughter, but they should look now as a kind of manslaughter. It's called unlawful and dangerous act causing death. And so you've got plenty of unlawfulness because this is obviously coercive controlling behaviour. That's unlawful. And the danger is very obvious to those who understand that link.
I mean, just in terms of the broader sort of ramifications of this case, because it is estimated, as Jackie said in her piece, a third of all female suicides in England and Wales are preceded by domestic abuse. Could this ruling pave the way for other grieving families of other abuse victims to get justice?
Yes, there is plenty of research that backs that figure, which was given to the inquest today by Mary Mason, a well-known domestic abuse specialist. And there is research that makes the link a very close one indeed. It is 30, even to 40% of female suicides that follow this kind of typical male-on-female domestic abuse. No doubt there's male-on-male domestic abuse, women on men sometimes, but this coercive control is absolutely something like 90% only men on women, and it's a precursor to this kind of hopelessness, but which just doesn't let anyone escape in any other way.
I mean, the other thing that came out of this case was, again, the terrible failings of the police, and they have apologised. They say that they've improved their handling of these kind of cases, and that is Kellie's legacy. Do you think that the officers who appeared to show such sort of casual indifference to her welfare, should they be investigated, lose their jobs?
Well, I think that's up to the force, but there were awful failings, were there not? So you can hear the blasé commentary about a lot of paperwork if we take this seriously, in effect. they filled in, it looks like a risk assessment, but that's not supposed to be a, oh, there are 4 ticks, that's the end of it, and she needs 6. It's supposed to be a basis on which you get a broader understanding of what's gone on and you make a judgment yourself.
They've got to be far more curious about these cases
well,
while the women are alive.
Yeah, how they regarded that as a standard risk, bearing in mind she said she was terrified and all that we've seen. I really don't know, but there were great failings in their professional curiosity. Firstly, the call came from a neighbour who'd been approached by one of the children who said she was being strangled on the floor, and they didn't interview the child.
Right.
They didn't interview the neighbour. Strangulation is a very dangerous indicator, and presumably even the police might have got that point if they had looked.
Dame Vera Baird, thank you very much for joining us.